Good morning, campers. Welcome to Radio Camp Happily, a Percy Jackson read-along podcast. I am your host, Zach.
And I'm B.
And this week we are reading wait a second. We're not reading a new chapter. We are reading a new book series. Oh my gosh. Today we're going to be reading a new book series. We're reading Heroes of Olympus. You guys voted for it, and you guys asked for it. And here we go. We're reading the first book, The Lost Hero.
The Lost Hero. So I guess the hero who's lost is, well, should I say?
I mean, they're already in it for the long haul. If they're 100 episodes in, they probably already know who the lost hero is.
It's somewhat of a plot twist at the end of the second chapter that I guess the lost hero is Percy Jackson, right? Because we're connecting this new series to the old series, which is kind of interesting. I assumed that there was a through line, but I didn't realize it would be made so early on in the book, which was kind of cool. I guess we'll get into that once we get to the very end of these two chapters. So what we did and what we're going to be doing from, at least for this series, we will be alternating, I guess, where one of us will give you a brief synopsis of the chapters. Usually it's more than one chapter. In this case, Zach is going to be doing that. Just because we're going to be dealing with a little bit more material than all of the Percy Jackson books that we did. So it's just to stay organized, we're going to just give you a bullet point kind of list of some of the stuff that happened so you kind of know where we're coming from. And then we could zero in on specific points and talk about things and analyze like we always have. But just so we can stay sort of on task. And then, in this case, it's my turn for our first week dealing with Heroes of Olympus. I will be naming all of what we read that week. So not just one chapter, but this chunk of reading that happens to be about this character.
We call it an episode,
Jason.
like if this was a TV show.
And we'll be naming things in the convention of the way that Rick Riordan would name a chapter. You know, I become Supreme Lord of the Bathroom. I accidentally vaporize my pre-algebra teacher. Those kinds of names for chapters that aren't always straightforward, and they're kind of punny, and they're a little bit tongue-in-cheek, and we're both going to try to aim towards something like that, and we'll see how it goes.
And I'm dying to hear what B has to put there because they have not told me. And also at the same time, I'm so excited for this because it's weird because the way we're going to do is we're trying to emulate Rick Riordan. So this is going to be interesting because both of us have different senses of humor. So let's see how this goes.
That's true. Yeah. So it's kind of difficult in some ways to emulate Rick Riordan because we sort of roast him in a way where a lot of his chapters, it can be very specific, he does a very good job of summing up what happens in this chapter. And sometimes he zeroes in on something that's kind of an inconsequential detail, but it's funny to him, basically. In this case, I thought it was funny to maybe think of just a specific detail, and it doesn't necessarily sum everything up, but okay, here it is. The first, I guess, episode title that I came up with is Jason Wins a Coin Toss.
Ooh, that's a good one. Oh, man, the one that I had thought of, this is just the runner-up, is My Date Goes Downhill. Kinda, because they were both holding hands.
Is it a date, though? I mean, he is with his sort of girlfriend. I mean, yes, we'll talk about that a little bit, but it goes downhill. Oh yeah, because they're at the cliff. I see where you're coming from there. He does like that kind of pun, take a double meaning of a word. So, I mean, I guess we'll sort of get into why I chose this as a chapter title, but a flipping of a coin, I guess will be, it'll become clear why that's important for Jason. I guess it's his equivalent of Riptide, of having a pen for a sword. In this case, he has a coin for a sword. So that's which is really interesting that they reveal. It's very similar to the way that they reveal Percy's sword in a way, because he also doesn't know what it does, but he sort of feels the need to do it. He's like, I have this thing in my pocket, and I guess I'll do this, and then it ends up being a sword. It's it's in some ways kind of hilarious to me, this idea that maybe if you do this thing to a common everyday object, it'll turn into a sword.
Yeah, one thing that I noticed, especially when it came to reading this chapter a lot, is it's almost a condensed version of the first couple chapters of The Lightning Thief, because it kind of starts off, and he already gets a sword. You find out what satyrs are. He's already fighting a monster. It's also an aerial version of a monster. And then at the same time, he also goes to a school for delinquents, and all of them pretty much are the exact same thing, except in this case, instead of it being in New York, it's in like Arizona, which for me it's almost like the polar opposite, which for me I really, really enjoy about this. You go from like the not the National History Museum, but the History Museum in the first book with Lightning Thief, and here you're going to somewhere that's like a natural history place.
Right, that's very similar. There's a lot of echoes of the first Percy Jackson book in this book, and that's probably very intentional, and also just the nature of this kind of story. It makes sense that you have to lay out a lot of the similar things. So why don't we read the synopsis for the first Jason chapter we're going to cover in this episode?
Okay, so the first chapter, chapter 1, Jason. Jason wakes up on a bus and he has no memory. All he knows is that he does not belong there. And the other thing is he's holding hands with a girl.
Scandalous.
Turns out he's hand holding. What's next? Hugging? Oof. Turns out he is on a field trip to the Grand Canyon with his friend Leo and his girlfriend Piper. Things go from bad to worse as he finds that he is a part of the Wilderness School, a school of delinquents in Nevada. They are going on a field trip to the Grand Canyon with their angry teacher, Coach Hedge. Turns out as they leave the bus, Coach Hedge knows that Jason is not one of the normal delinquents, but things go from bad to worse.
I really see the echoes of Lightning Thief in this. Like you said, they're on a field trip going to see this like historical thing obviously that's a very Rick Riordan move, right? Because he's all into like history and Americana and natural monuments or national monuments, so...
There's nothing more Americana than the Grand Canyon because it's just this gigantic hole in the ground, which I love. It's the Great Divide, so to speak.
And then also the fact that there's a teacher who's kind of like not what he says he is, and you're kind of like, wait, is he a bad guy or a good guy? Like there's just like a lot of similarities happening here.
The first time that I read this, I thought he was kind of like the replacement for like Gabe in the first, like in the Lightning Thief, because he has like that very Gabe energy. But he isn't like that at all.
You think so? Well, because he's aggressive? I mean, yeah, at first I think it's a bit of a red herring because you're supposed to maybe be like, oh, is he a monster or something? But he's really kind of more of a combination of, I guess, Chiron and
Dionysus?
Grover? Or I was going to say Grover, actually, because he's like a satyr and he's like sort of communicating with Camp about these half-bloods that he found. So there's echoes of a lot of other characters we've met before. It's sort of funny that they have this misdirect where he's so like gruff, and I could see the Mr. D comparison too, because he doesn't seem thrilled to be dealing with these half-bloods, but then of course later you realize he's just like this really like capable satyr who's helping them. He seems suspicious at first.
As we find out as well, as he came out of retirement to help, this was kind of like, this is his retirement, this is his Florida job, pretty much.
Right. Yeah, send him out to pasture.
And even like when it comes down to it, the way they even describe him, they even pretty much give it off the bat. Like he has like these super white tennis shoes. He always carries a baseball bat. Like already things like when you're thinking about him, like it's like, again, a like really typical like Rick Riordan adult is very much like over the top like this. But normally they're like monsters in that sense.
Yeah, I do think that that's a very intentional Rick Riordan thing to be like, oh, here's this adult authority figure. I'm going to kind of make fun of them because that's sort of, I think, something that children can really relate to is like zeroing in on the physical presentation of like whether it be a coach or a teacher or something and be like, what's their deal? They're kind of really intense. And I don't know, like that he's definitely speaking the same language as like a teenager who's like, what's the deal with that coach who's like walking around with that megaphone?
Another thing as well is like because they're going to the school, they're calling him coach. This is very like echoey to like my whole high school experience because my high school is very famous for its sports programs, and all of our teachers are all called coaches. This is my public school, like we all called them coaches. No, yeah, we did that. Like I went to high school with a Laker. Like, there's a lot of things that happen.
Meanwhile, the college I went to, you only ever called teachers or professors by their first names, which is weird.
I only had to do that when I was in the theater program because that's what it's customary to call everyone by their first names. So I don't even know the last names of most of my professors, but yet when you're in high school, you know everyone's last name, and it's like it was almost like this weird like taboo name to know their first names. Ooh.
I also think that this echoes Lightning Thief in the way that the school is like specifically for delinquents, much like the school that
Rich
Percy is in.
delinquents.
Yeah, it's a similar kind of thing where it's like this is like a theme that we've seen with demigods, that they're sort of, I guess, troublemakers, or they're perceived to be. And again, that's like very intentional because they have ADHD, they have dyslexia. It's sort of meant to like represent the way that a lot of kids with different learning disabilities aren't really given a fair chance to succeed, and they're seen as like mess ups, they're seen as like, delinquents who are just like no good. And of course there's like the token like mean horrible kid who actually is really bad, and in this case I guess it would be
It was that one girl.
the one yeah, like the mean, well, there's actually like a few mean kids, so it's not just Nancy.
Well, so there's the mean girl, and then there's Dylan.
There's Dylan, who of course he ends up being a literal monster, and then there's like a gaggle of quote unquote popular girls, which I mean, I have complicated feelings about the way that those are described, I guess. Because then they of course end up being sincerely terrible because they're like racist towards Piper. But there's just a touch of like a not like other girls, like weird misogyny going on, where it's like describing how their makeup was like Halloween makeup and stuff. It's like that's not really necessary to the story to describe like why they're bad people. Like they're bad people because they're mean and judgmental and racist, not because they wear makeup. Do you know what I mean?
See, I don't think that's kind of the point. I think the point is that that's just a way to describe them. Then again, Rick Riordan also described Piper's hair as like chocolate, and I was like, okay.
Well, yeah, the way that he describes Piper is that she doesn't have makeup and that she doesn't want
She's
attention,
pretty
but it
without
doesn't
being
work.
pretty.
She's pretty without trying to be, and I think that that's a very like mid 2000s idea of like feminism, where it's like, yeah, this is what a real independent girl looks like. She bucks the norm and she doesn't wear makeup. And I think we've kind of moved past that dichotomy of being like girls who are like mean and superficial, they wear makeup and they care about their appearance, and girls who don't sort of focus on that kind of thing, they're somehow better or more virtuous in some ways. Like, oh, they stick to their guns and they don't care how they're perceived or whatever. But I think it's more complicated than that. Like, the reason that those girls are bad is because of their actions and not because of the way that they dress or
Yeah,
look.
it's not their appearance, but rather their internal appearance.
I wouldn't necessarily judge Rick Riordan for this because that is like a very common, I guess,
It's a trope.
characterization. Yeah, from that time, like when this was written, like I don't know how long ago was this
This
published.
was probably like 2009, 2010.
2009, 2010. Yeah, that's kind of what I guessed, because like I think that was still a very common way to like describe, like catty girls, mean girls. They like look this certain way.
Yeah, even when it comes to like, I'm looking at this like fantasy at this time, like we have the trope of like, she's not like any other girl. She like wears pants and likes to play with knives. Like that was something that's kind of they've been trying to get away from as well. There's plenty of fantasy novels now, especially from authors, where they're trying to get away from like, okay, the only way to be, a true quote unquote girl is to not have to wear makeup and dresses. You can be like Katniss Everdeen.
Exactly. Like you can both be someone who is feminine in these stereotypical ways and also be like a headstrong, independent girl who has opinions. And I think that like false dichotomy was really popular and perpetrated by a lot of like YA at the time, and that's like not really a thing anymore. Hopefully I don't think people talk in the same way that they did like 10 years ago. So it's again, it's just outdated.
There's also kind of like I would consider it kind of an outdated trope at this point, but it's, the trope of someone waking up with amnesia because you don't know, like, you don't know how to really introduce the character that well. So like, oh, they don't remember who they are, but here at least it's a little different
Right.
because
It gives
what I
you
like
an
about it
excuse
is
to ask a lot of questions, I guess.
it gives you an excuse to ask a lot of questions, which is I like about that because they make this character kind of like the placeholder character. He's going to ask all the questions that the readers need to read.
Right, exactly. Which we talked about with Percy Jackson, right? Because that in his case, he doesn't have amnesia because he actually is like just introduced to the demigod stuff. He didn't know any of it. His mom kept it a secret. In this case, obviously, Jason knows something about being a demigod, but we don't quite know what he knows or how he knows, but he can't remember. But it's a similar the net result of that is the same in that he doesn't really know the ins and outs of like why he's a demigod or why he can turn a coin into a sword or all these things. So we're finding out with him. Though in some ways we know more than him, right? Because we've already read this first series, and I guess you could technically jump into the series without reading Percy Jackson, but it helps.
Here's the million drachma question, because I was like reading this chapter and trying to think of it based off of like, if you've never read Percy Jackson before, and for some reason your mom accidentally bought you, Heroes of Olympus first, would this work as its own thing? And so far, it like the first couple chapters, like again, it's a very condensed version of the Lightning Thief, where you have, you already know right off the bat what a haplet is, what a demigod is, what a monster is, and also we also know about like the dust and kind of like how the characters work and how they have powers, because they break out like Half-Blood Hill. They talk about all these things. If you've never read the series, it still doesn't make any sense. But if you read the series, like, oh, I know these things. These things are so familiar to me. And I like that, especially when you have amnesia in that way.
They're a callback instead of more confusing, which is, it's kind of funny. Like, I mean, this character has amnesia. He forgets these things. So I think if you were someone who hadn't read Percy Jackson, you would feel much like Jason. You'd be like, what are you talking about? And in some ways that might immerse you in the story in a different way. But personally, I was very grateful that I already read the like Percy Jackson and the Olympians before I read this, because I would be just a little bit too out to drift. I'd be like, I don't know what's happening with this. I don't know what they're referring to. I feel much like this character who's forgotten who he is, but I don't know, it'd just be like a little bit too disorienting. So I'd probably suggest reading the other series first.
Well, also the problem though is the twist at the end wouldn't work if you hadn't read the first one. They're like, who's this Percy Jackson fellow?
Exactly. Yes, right. Because that's like such a, mic drop, like dun 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 moment, where they reveal that I guess the lost hero in the name of this book, I assume, is Percy Jackson, or at the very least it's very important to the story that Percy Jackson is a character. And for you to just say his name, it doesn't have the same weight if you don't know who that is, if you haven't gone through several books of him being the hero of that story, or I guess technically not the hero of that story, but we could get into that.
Especially when you have like the introduction of Annabeth, the way they have her, because we're kind of skipping ahead a little bit, is like they even like first describe her not as Annabeth, they describe her as the blonde-haired girl, and they kind of start to describe everything, and eventually they talk about Annabeth, because you can infer that, okay, who's the one blonde-haired kid at camp that's a girl?
No, exactly. I mean, I think a lot of YA authors especially do this thing where they have like maybe two traits of a character that like really represent them. So even if you were to just describe them, you'd pick them out even though it's just text.
Oh, yeah, an example of this would be like, you have to meet my friend. She's very smart and like can foresee the future. As he described her, I went into this little hut, sat on the chair. The first thing I noticed was this plain girl. She had hair red as fire, red as flame. And she was also had a tie-dye shirt on.
Wait, are you describing Rachel Elizabeth Derry?
Yeah, exactly.
There's usually like shorthand, you know what I mean? Like Harry Potter is our go-to. Like, oh, he has glasses, he has a scar on his forehead, he has like messy hair. Like those kinds of things or like Ron has red hair. He has eyes like his mother, there's always these like very specific details that are always like mentioned when you're trying to like get across to the reader that this is a character, but we haven't quite named them yet. So if you've read the other series, you're going to know that this is Annabeth right away. Like, why did they mention that she was blonde and tall and that she had gray eyes? Like that, those are details that we've heard before to describe Annabeth. Like those are her like, bullet point. Like if you had like three things you could say that Annabeth looked like physically, what would it be? And it works very well because they've sort of, Rick Riordan has trained us into thinking, oh, those are things associated with Annabeth. So as soon as you quote unquote see her in the text, before they even reveal that it's Annabeth, you know that it's her.
Well, here the major issue with this, and I think I would like to save it towards the end, but we'll kind of talk about it right now a little bit, is how when it's like the passing of the baton, like example of this is Star Wars, I'm just going to have to give this because it's the easiest example, is when you start a new series kind of in that same universe, the first questions you ask are, hey, where are my favorite characters? What happened to them? Like the problem is like, it's a great story element to have Percy Jackson out of the picture, because the second Percy Jackson enters the whole book, all the new characters become less interesting because you care about Percy Jackson.
Right, you're so invested in him already. So yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense that it is sort of about him. Because again, I'm assuming that the title of this book is about him, but because he's indisposed inherently, it lets us focus on these new characters, which, like, let's be honest, they feel a lot like characters we've met before to some extent. Like, Jason is what, our new Percy, right? Because he's like this oblivious hero who's trying to figure out who he is. And then Piper is our new Annabeth.
And then we have Leo, who is kind of wisecracking and cracks jokes.
Yeah, he's the comedic relief, which, I mean, he's not quite as innocent as Grover, so he's not exactly the same. Again, I'm not saying they are exactly the same, but they're fulfilling similar roles. So we're being eased into this new series by being presented these characters in a way that's like familiar. You're like, oh right, this kind of feels like something we've done before.
One thing that I noticed as well is because Percy Jackson's very deliberately middle grade, and how those issues are very middle grade, and that right off the bat, all the conflicts in this first chapter are like more of like a YA thing, like racism, kind of like talking about, racism, knowing who you are, feeling like you're like weirdly alienated, like you have a girlfriend.
Right. It's always interesting to me when Percy Jackson chooses to discuss actual, I guess, social issues, because a lot of what Percy Jackson does is, I guess, metaphorical social issues. We've talked about how Tyson, he represents a few things, like it was that sort of a metaphor for racism? Was it a metaphor for ableism? It was kind of both in some ways, but it was about prejudice. But in this case, there's an actual real life problem of like racism, or specifically hate towards indigenous people. And we're talking about it in this children's book, and it's a little bit different than what we're used to with Percy Jackson, which I think is a bit more subtle usually.
Like normally when we have it like in Percy Jackson, the way they do it is more of like they're kind of skidding on the toes of it. Like usually they use like a myth, or they use like a legend of some sort, or like a character that's like a monster to explain like, oh, racism, genocide, like weird things. But here it's like actually to a camper.
Yeah, exactly. I guess the closest they ever get to that is the sort of bias towards people with ADHD and dyslexia, which is an actual thing.
But they also drop that really quickly, because once Percy Jackson gets to camp,
right, then he's the normal one again. That's accepted. So yeah, I think it feels so much more like a real tackling of like those types of like ableism issues in the beginning of Percy Jackson, when he is in that school, and it's all about like, oh, you're such like a problem child, you don't understand that, like the way that people with learning disabilities are treated. That does feel so much more like an important theme in like the beginning, when Percy's like, I don't fit in anywhere, and then he comes to Camp Half-Blood and he's like, I fit in here, and then it kind of becomes like a non-problem, which is funny in a way. You don't really have to like confront the way that people like that are treated in the real world anymore if you create a fake place where that's like the norm, or a strength even.
Whereas here they kind of like, when they have like ADHD, they even bring it up in this chapter because Leo makes a joke about it. It's like, I don't do homework. Like I got ADHD, man. Like he already knows about it and he's already cracking jokes.
Yeah, I kind of already presumed that all three of them were demigods, but as soon as he said that, I was like, well, he has to be, because there's no way they would intentionally mention that. And like, is it, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but is it canonical that every person with ADHD and dyslexia is also a demigod?
Normally when it comes to demigods, they brought up in the first couple chapters of Percy Jackson, where it's like, you're more likely to have it because you're wired differently, in the sense of like ADHD is your battle reflexes, dyslexia means you're wired to read Greek, like things like that. Though here it's a little different because Jason's trying to like bring all the stuff up, but he's bringing it up in like a different context. Like it's like, Coach Hedge, you're a fawn. Like, no, I'm not. I'm a satyr.
That fawns are Roman. Yeah, that's kind of funny. Again, this does feel very much like the Percy Jackson we're used to, and that's kind of nice in a way. I was kind of afraid that reading this would be like, oh, this is different, or I'm not used to this, because we've been reading Percy Jackson for like years now, and I didn't know how we'd ease into it, but it just feels pretty familiar as far as like tone and the way that things are presented, even like the style of the way that, what's the word that you always use where it's like
infotainment.
Infotainment. Yeah, it's the style of infotainment is super similar, right? Like about like you said, the thing about whether it's a satyr or a faun, and I was like, no, well, that's Roman. Like little things like that are so very Percy Jackson, to like have just this little aside that actually ends up teaching you something, or even just the fact that setting is in the Grand Canyon. It's like very Americana, and then they mention like the different types of like striations of rocks and things like, you know.
Yeah, they talk about like erosion. They talk about all the sediments. For me, as a person that loves the national park system, like for me, I was like geeking out. Like I don't even know how to like. I don't need this sheet. I can just like name all these things off the top of my head. Like you got your other rocks and igneous rocks.
Eventually, Jason has this weird moment where he breaks free of his amnesia and remembers the name, like a Ventus or Venti, I guess,
Venti.
are like these,
Like the coffee.
yeah, like I know, I was like, I can't even Google this. Starbucks will just come up, but it's literally though, it's I guess a storm spirit, and he somehow knows about that. But this is, of course, yet another Percy Jackson, Rick Riordan object lesson in a mythological thing. Like, oh, we're finding out along with the main character. Now's the time to explain what that is, because he's amnesiac and he sort of remembers who he is, but like now I guess he just remembers the mythological thing, which is kind of a change of pace than we're used to. But
I think it's more based off like pure instinct, because there's the part where he jumps off pretty much the skyway, and it's, you know, he's plummeting towards his death, and he realizes, oh yeah, I have powers.
that reminded me of another moment in Percy Jackson. Can you guess?
When he jumps off the gateway arch.
Yeah, the Gateway Arch, right? Because it's a similar kind of like, let's test my powers thing, like literally a leap of faith. Like that's, I mean,
And this is right after he gets like hit by lightning.
that's true. He does get hit by lightning. It is just kind of, there's just so many beats that are very reminiscent of Percy Jackson, and I'm in some ways looking forward to how this book branches out from that and how things change. And obviously we have the difference of it's not just from one perspective. Like I guess you could argue that the Percy Jackson books have somewhat of like a ensemble cast anyway, even though it's like from his perspective. But in this case, like we're going to be like changing focus from one character to another, so it'll feel less like, oh, here's this one main character.
What I like about it as well is like we start with Jason, and it's not like, hey, I didn't want to be a demigod. It's rather than I just woke up and like, what the heck has happened to my life? Whoa, which I like better.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it doesn't have that like omniscient understanding of what's to come. It's like, I don't know anything.
And I like that a lot more, especially when it comes to, you know, now that we have different viewpoint characters, because reading Percy Jackson, you realize very quickly that it's a really great series, but also at the same time, Rick Riordan was very limited in what he could do with getting information. Like he kept falling back to Percy Jackson falling to sleep. Someone gives him information, an iris message.
Right, because it was just from Percy. Right. True. Right, the visions were very important because of that, and we kind of made fun of it to some extent. It's like, oh, here comes another dream, another vision, another like weird iris message that was unsolicited. But
that's the way you got information across, and that's the only way you could figure it out.
How else would he do that? There's if it's not literally right in front of Percy somehow or being transmitted to him, there's no way for us as readers to know what's happening. And if he wants us to know that information, then he figured out a pretty good method of doing that, as much as we teased him for it.
For me, what I love is I actually really do enjoy multiple viewpoint characters. This is one of the reasons why I love A Song of Ice and Fire, is because when it comes to different viewpoint characters, you're getting into people's heads, and you're also getting pretty much, they're not all the same characters, so you're getting different viewpoints from different viewpoints, if that makes any sense. Like, oh, why is this person this way? Why is they angry? And then all of a sudden you understand, oh, this is why the process of thinking.
Oh, this is why they're, yeah, exactly. I'm really fascinated to see once we move on to, I guess it's going to switch between him, Leo, and Piper. Is that
yes.
The three characters? So I'd just be really interested to see, like, what does she think of Jason, you know, because he's, you know, this like babbling, awkward teen who is, I guess they're dating, but he doesn't remember that they're dating, and he's like, I wish I remembered because she seems really cool. Like, what is her concept of him? Or like, what is her concept of, like, let's say the bullying girls, like that? We're seeing that from such an outside perspective because he's witnessing that happen, and he doesn't even really know who she is, but all he knows is, I think the quote is something like, he doesn't know who Piper is, but he hates like mean kids or whatever. Like he wants to stand up for bullying regardless of who it's happening to.
And also when it comes to like Piper, they brought up something interesting in the first chapter, is that her dad's really important. Like if they knew who her dad was, they would be quiet.
Right, which then made me think like, I think for a brief moment I thought that Leo and Piper knew they were demigods, and there is some sort of understanding that they come from some sort of like magical lineage, but that later becomes I guess that's later revealed to not be true. So I'm like, okay, so he's important in a different way that's not mythological, I guess, but I don't know what that is. So that's kind of intriguing. It reminds me actually a lot of Rachel Elizabeth Dare, where they kept like hinting to the fact that her dad was this big, powerful businessman.
And then he's just some guy.
I mean, just some guy. He's like a rich guy, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, he's a rich guy, but just some guy.
Yeah, he's not the president or anything. I mean, he could be. We have that conspiracy theory.
Oh, is this the Disney Channel original movie, I Dated the President's Daughter?
Yeah, oh yeah, My Date with the President's Daughter, which featuring the classic theme song with the lyrics, My Date with the President's Daughter, My Date with the President's Daughter. Good job. Really great songwriting.
My favorite part is in the trailer, there's the part where she's like, oh, I live in this house on Pennsylvania Avenue. It's a really cute white one.
Oh my God.
And like, he looks at the address, and then the paper goes down, and he sees the White House.
Oy vey.
Ugh.
Wonderful.
Man. This is great. So, you want to go on to chapter 2, B?
I think we should. So are you gonna read the synopsis for chapter 2?
B, hold on to your socks, because obviously Jason didn't.
No, he did not.
No. So Jason has a shock of his life as it turns out that Coach Hedge is actually a satyr, and also that jerk Dylan is actually a venti, and not the kind that is served hot.
Oh my God.
He's a wind spirit and trying to kill Piper, Leo, and Jason. Jason gets struck by lightning and gets a cool sword. As Piper nearly plummets to her death, Jason learns to fly before Piper gets a new date with gravity. The Venti is recalled back to its master as the familiar blonde shows up to rescue the gang, as an old friend has gone missing.
Old friend. It's her boyfriend. It's Percy. It's pretty
I like how
obvious.
they even bring that up very clearly. It's like, oh, her boyfriend, Percy Jackson.
Like, you don't need to
man.
say his full name, but here it is. Yeah, I loved how kind of self-aware that was in a way. They didn't have to be like, it's Percy Jackson, but I guess he wanted that real record scratch moment where it's revealed.
He also wanted the record scratch of my boyfriend or her boyfriend.
Right. I mean, we know it's Annabeth, and if she's talking about a boyfriend, it's pretty clear that it's Percy, unless that'd be like a real kind of sad addendum to the last book series where you're like, oh, they're finally together, and then you find out that they've broken up in the interim. You know what I mean? Like, that's...
What is this, like a show in between seasons?
Right, exactly.
Oh, man.
Like that.
I hate
feel like that happens in the X-Files, where in the reboot you find out that they were together, but then they
were together,
broken
but
up,
then they
and you're
got
like, wait,
divorced.
this is the worst possible version of this.
No, it's because they wanted to have conflict. And you know what? We're never going to get a season 2 of that show because it ended off on a cliffhanger, and I hate it.
I stopped
Thanks.
watching because I was like, this isn't as good.
Don't worry, it's terrible. It's terrible. Don't get me started about the new X-Files. I'll get mad.
I've already got you started,
but-
it sounds like.
No, you didn't. But even like when it comes to here, I like that the way that it sounds. It's been like a year or two, so the whole process is starting over again. And also with this, we're now getting into what I feel like is a much better. Like Rick Riordan obviously got better at writing fight scenes because there's a lot of spatial awareness. Like, we'll probably have a picture on Twitter about the Skyview about this, because the way they have it is they're on the Skyview. And you have the character, like, he turns into the storm spirit, and I really enjoyed this fight scene a lot because you had that spatial awareness.
Right, yeah, I was gonna say, I did have a bit of an easier time following it. I mean, we've talked about how don't love fight scenes. I think it went on for like a bit long, not for my taste. Like not even, I'm not even like necessarily judging the book or saying that they didn't need to write it that way, because obviously you need to kind of convey what happened, but it's like not my favorite thing to read. I was like, we get it, there's a sword and like people are falling off the cliff and it's like whatever. It is what it is. It's like not my favorite thing to read about, but as far as the way it was written, I had a little bit of an easier time understanding, like, spatially where everyone was. Maybe the only thing that I had a little bit of difficulty with is that because I'm so new to this book, and there's a lot of, like, Jason did this, Leo did this, and, like, I'm not saying that their names are similar, but they're all kind of, like, mixed up in my head, where, like, Piper's the only girl character that I'm like, oh, obviously her, and then the coach, like, that's not difficult to delineate, obviously, because he's like a different age, but I don't know, for some reason, like, I think Jason, Leo, and then I keep literally forgetting the name of the evil guy, Dylan. Yeah, they're all just kind of like, I don't know, teen boy names, and I kept being like, wait, who did what? And like, that was a little bit confusing.
What
to
is
me,
this, a boy band be?
Right, yeah, they all sound like freaking Backstreet Boys or something, but it's that's less to do with Rick Riordan and more to do with like just me adjusting to these new characters. I don't have like a clear picture in my head yet of all of them.
Well, also, like, when it comes to Percy Jackson, is that their names are so different. Like, you have Annabeth, Percy, and Grover. They're all completely different alphabetically.
Right, they're more distinct, I guess. Well, these are like kind of more normal names. I guess that's probably why I had a harder time because like Leo, Jason, and Dylan are like, they're not that common, some of them. Like, I don't know if I've met a Leo.
Really, B? You've never met a Leo before? I think, the astrological signs are pretty...
Oh, I thought you were going to make a Leonardo DiCaprio joke.
Oh, no, I wasn't.
You went in a different direction. And surprisingly, I didn't name my turtle Leonardo. I named my turtle Donatello.
Really? What, you did?
Yeah, I did. I had a turtle named Donatello.
Oh, man, if I had a rat, I'd name it Splinter.
Yeah, and then they'd be friends or not. I don't know if turtles and rats can literally be friends or if that's just on TV.
For some reason, I'm imagining you sewing like a little bandana.
Yeah, it wouldn't be thrilled to have that, but it was a red cheek slider, so it had like red stripes on the side of its face. It ran away.
Wait. Your turtle ran away.
Okay. It didn't run away.
No, it sounds
escaped?
like it ran away.
It escaped in the night is really what happened.
Oh, so it took all your pizza? Oh no, we've been robbed. It ran away.
Well, my mom was kind of irresponsible and took his tank and put it outside for a night because we were like renovating the room that he was in. And then the next day it was empty. And then what she didn't tell me was that she found his shell in the backyard.
Oh.
So that an animal must have, it was a bad situation. But instead, what she told me as a child was that he must have run away. And then since we live like, I don't know, 100 feet from a lake, he just went to live in the lake. And I was like, okay. And I was really sad about it. And I believed that for years until she was like, he died, right? So
I'm also imagining, like, you kept getting letters in the mail from the turtle, like your mom kept writing, it's on a farm somewhere.
Right, yeah, no, or it's in the lake, like, having adventures with other turtles. I mean, that's not beyond the realm of possibility.
Man.
Turtles do live in that lake, but I believe that for way too long.
Yeah, oh man, turtle ran away.
Anyway, little turtle addendum there.
Speaking of, like, turtles, what I like about this is that even with the fight scene, like, we have, like, I'm about to say Coach Grover, but it's Coach Hedge. And like
same difference.
Even like they break it like he's a satyr, no one bats an eye. But also he's actually very like capable, like unlike Grover, who is like the exact opposite.
Right, he's very much not like Grover. That's why he reminded me more of Chiron in that case, because he's like, like an old hand. He's done this 1,000 times. Or even like when he goes and saves Leo from the ledge that he's like fallen, he's like gripping onto the edge of the Grand Canyon. And then when he comes back and he sees that Jason has quickly dispersed of two of, I guess, these like these Venti spirits that have been like summoned by Dylan. And the only Dylan is left, and then the coach is kind of angry at him. He's like, "Oh, I like a challenge. Did you leave anything for me?"
B, what you're telling me is the other Venti spirits were named Kyle and Cody, or Hunter.
Right? Yeah, I know, like the most like teen boy names ever.
Yeah, and
it's like Dylan. Everybody's known a Dylan that they hated. I feel like.
Oh, I know plenty of Dylans. I know a lot of Hunters. I know Coopers.
If you were born in the 90s, you know a Dylan who's the worst.
Oh man, yeah, they all wear like the Fox Motorsports hats, short shorts.
Oh man, stop! You're giving me a horrible flashback.
I always think that like the good old boys, even though they live like in the whitest possible places that are like in the north. Going back a little bit when it comes to like. What I also love about when you have Jason's headspace is that he's just pure instinct. Like, he gets the coin, which I love that every time he gets something, kind of Rick Riordan does this thing where it kind of examines things. Like, he has this coin that literally just says Julius on it. I know it's spelled differently, but that's how you spell it, Julius. And he's like, his first instinct is to flip the coin. It becomes this cool sword. Again, it's a lot like Antilochus or, Riptide in that sense of, a magical thing you can have in your pocket and still kick butt.
I guess, is that like just in general a device that Rick Riordan has like written into this world? Like, does everybody have like a...
No, only that's a main character thing.
It's a main character thing, right? Because like not everybody has a thing that magically transforms.
Because Annabeth had the knife and she kept it like
right,
strapped
but
to her.
It was just a knife.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it turned into a watch or something. or like a cool bracelet.
Well, if you look at Percy Jackson, he had a sword and a shield. What were both of them?
Wasn't it? Okay, so one was a pen, right?
Yeah.
And then I forget, was it a watch that turned into a shield? Yeah.
Yeah, it was the other one was a watch. So they're both like main character weapons, so like they can be concealed.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking that's the only other example of like, a mundane object that turns into a weapon or something you could use in battle. But yeah, other characters don't get that. Only main characters.
Well, here's the thing though. I think Jason's weapon is so versatile because say like you're running out of like money, like does it come back to you? Hopefully like he like buys a sandwich with a gold coin and then just comes right back to his pocket so he has infinite monies.
If you've been conditioned to understand the way that the Percy Jackson universe works, which we have after reading those books, it's pretty obvious that the coin would turn into a sword, I guess, because we're just like, oh, it's a small object you carry around, and then it turns into a weapon. Like I wasn't really surprised by that at all. Again, like you said, these first two chapters echo Lightning Thief so much. There isn't really that many moments where I felt like surprised because we've been so like acclimated to this world and how it works, and even like the confused character who's figuring it all out. Like it's all very similar.
There's a lot of that similarities, especially again coming back to the trope of amnesia, where you have that where like you're trying to figure things out. And the great thing about it as well is that you have a character like Coach Hedge who kind of doesn't know that Jason doesn't know everything, so he's kind of spilling the beans. So you're pretty much getting like caught up as quickly as humanly possible.
Right, and he's sort of giving him the third degree at first and saying, oh, do you really not know who you are? And he's suspicious. Like at first he thought that Jason was the monster, and of course it was another kid in the case of Dylan. But yeah, that was kind of interesting because, again, when you first meet Coach Hedge, you're like, oh, he's kind of aggressive. Is he the monster? But then he's accusing Jason of being the monster and then realizes, of course, he's telling the truth. I'm really fascinated to find out why Jason has amnesia, because obviously that's going to be important to the plot somehow. Like, he knows to some extent that he's a demigod. He has all these things. He has a coin already that turns into a sword. He has some latent knowledge of these mythical creatures. He kind of knew what Aventi was somewhere deep in the recesses of his mind. So there's something going on here, and I don't know what, or like what power has made him have amnesia.
All we know is that he can be survived by lightning and he can fly. Which I don't know what type of powers those are, but that's kind of cool.
Yeah, survived by lightning and fly. I mean, that's like a lot of demigods though, like because they're strong, so it's like survived by lightning.
How many demigods do you know that can jump off the equivalent of the Empire State Building in free fall and pick up his girlfriend and not die?
The specific the specific way that his flying is described, I think, is maybe a clue as to what's going on with Jason. Like, okay, he doesn't fly necessarily or float necessarily as like the wind is pushing him upwards, so he has control of the wind. And again, when the storm spirits appear, before we know that it's a storm spirit and we figure out what's happening with Dylan, the coach interrogates Jason and thinks that he's caused the storm. So from what I understand, I guess he's manipulating weather, which if we're going by Greek mythology, he's a son of Zeus, I guess, because of like lightning.
I don't know.
Because if he could survive lightning, and if he could control light, and if he can, you know what I'm saying? So that's kind of my best guess, unless there's like a kind of more deep cut god that he's the child of.
But B, that would make no sense if this is taking place a couple years after Percy Jackson. They still have the big three.
Right, and there was a ban on having... Right, exactly. So it doesn't quite match, but that's like the only guess I had, because I can't really... I don't know enough, I guess, about mythology to make a better guess. But it has something to do, I think, with the weather, right?
Yeah, he's the weather god, naturist. I don't know.
Yeah, something to do with weather or nature, because... Then again, though, when the coach accuses him of causing the storm, he doesn't know who he is, so it's not necessarily like he's assuming that, but he does have the ability to control the air. We know that, and we know that he can survive lightning. So that's like I'm putting that on like the, in the back of my mind, like hopefully more clues will be revealed and I'll kind of understand a little bit more about Jason. Or he'll remember who he is, which I don't know how long this amnesia thing is going to happen. Like, if that's, like, just a device in the early chapters to kind of get us acclimated, or if he's going to be, like, have amnesia the whole time. Because that might get annoying. I don't know.
Now, what about Leo and Piper? Who do you think they possibly could be?
Right. I don't have as much of a guess about either of them because we really don't get a lot of like one-on-one time with them or even like what their abilities are other than I guess Leo, he's very good at like engineering and that kind of thing. So I'm trying to think what god is associated with that and I'm not sure.
Oh man, you're really blowing it.
I know I am. Hold on. Okay, wait. Let me stop to think for a second. Um, God of engineering. Hmm.
It's fine. It's fine. We don't need it. I made an obvious joke, but that's okay.
I know. Really blowing it. Hold on. Wait, it was an obvious. Now I'm freaking out. Okay. I mean, is it a Hephaestus or I mean, like?
I don't know. I
Because
won't
I know
tell
that
you.
Hephaestus was associated with like a few characters who are good at like tinkering and that kind of thing, and that's what he seems to do. Like he has pipe cleaner and like nuts and bolts, and he's always moving his hands trying to build something. He builds a helicopter which like flies a few feet before
Plummets.
plummeting down. Yeah, I mean, and he's like, oh, if I had a rubber band, then it would really fly. So it's something like that. As for Piper, I don't think I don't know. I'm trying to like remember if there's any like detail that gives a hint as to what her godly parent is. We don't like deal with her that much other than when she's in a fight scene because she's like kind of sequestered by Dylan, like, and he's trying to be her partner or date and is like flirting with her, so we don't talk to her as much as Jason. Oh man, I know that like people are probably angry at me that I can't do a better guess than that, but yeah, Piper is a little bit harder to figure out, but maybe I missed something or I'm not remembering something.
Who knows who she is? All we know is that all three of them are demigods, and that's the most important thing
Right.
because the cavalry comes, and it turns out Annabeth was thinking that Percy Jackson would be there, but again, we get
But
a
he's
new
not there.
prophecy because we're getting because Jason got hit by lightning, his shoes exploded off.
Right, so he's missing a shoe, and then apparently she was told by somebody that if she finds a guy missing a shoe, then that's like the answer. And I suppose the answer is her finding out where Percy is because he's missing.
Yes, and that myth is actually based off of Jason and the Argonauts.
Right, where his
Oh,
shoe is
convenient.
missing.
Yeah, where his sandal's missing. He's saved by a man, and he ends up getting the golden fleece. We got Leonardo, and I don't know if Piper's just the name or is it like.
Right, I mean, of course, Leonardo is like a very funny.
Oh no, is it? Oh god, I just thought of it. I'm an idiot. Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah, like Leonardo da Vinci because he builds flying machines and stuff. Like that's very obvious. He shortens it to Leo because that's like the classic Rick Riordan trick where he changes their name slightly so you don't immediately think of it. You know what I mean?
Do you know how long it just took me to realize that?
How long?
Couple years.
Couple years ago, because you haven't. Wow, you didn't figure it out that. I mean, I guess I didn't
No.
quite connect the dots until just now, but yeah, it's obviously a Leonardo da Vinci reference there.
B, and obviously Piper's named after Piper from the movie Robots.
Sure.
Yep, with Amanda Bynes.
Yeah, the name isn't quite obvious with her. She's a little bit more unscrutable than the other characters, so we'll see.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we have this now where we have kind of, we're being the passing of the baton. We're having all these new characters and they're interacting in a much different way than we're so accustomed to. And I like, the fight scene's interesting, but at the same time, we have a lot of questions now, especially if you're a new person. Like, what is all going on?
Yeah, if you didn't read Percy Jackson before this, it would really kind of throw you for a loop, I think.
And now, if you're an older reader of this, like you've read all the Percy Jackson books at this point,
Mhm.
you're just like, where's Percy? I gotta go find him.
Right, now you're very invested already because you have several books of his adventures already making you invested in him as a character. If you're new to this, then you're like, who is this guy? I know vaguely there's another series about him. Maybe I should read that first.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. That's why I like the bridging of the gap because, obviously this is kind of a sequel series as of like right now. It's a sequel series to Percy Jackson. Like what is happening with Annabeth? What is happening with Percy? What is just happening in general? Because now they're like older teenagers because obviously Percy Jackson's either 16 or 17. Annabeth is the same. The one thing I love about multiple viewpoint characters is that we're so used to like Annabeth and all these people. Where the viewpoints is like Jason, Piper, and Leo. like seeing them from an external place of not seeing them do all their heroic deeds from the last series. Like, oh, Annabeth is kind of mean, or so to speak, or people having conflicts with people, even though we're so invested in the original series on them. Like, what are the interactions going to be like in camp?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing like how different this book is from Percy Jackson, how it connects to what we already know, what old characters we're going to encounter. Obviously, Chiron is going to probably make another appearance because he's, back at camp. So, like, once we get to camp, there's going to be obviously some old familiar faces, and we're going to find out maybe why Percy is missing or get clues as to what's happening there. It's kind of interesting because of like this little bit of a time skip, like, oh, how is Annabeth doing? What's her life been like since the end of the last book series? It's kind of cool to imagine both following up with old characters and then meeting these new characters and figuring out like, okay, who are they? What are their godly parents? Because again, we made this deal at the end of the last book, the end of the last series, that the gods would claim their children. So
yes. So we're going to see a lot more cabins because
we're going to see more of an obvious answer to who their godly parents are. It's not going to be like they're going to be stuck forever in the Hermes cabin just waiting it out. Like, we'll find it out, I guess, once they go to camp, which is kind of interesting.
They'll get instantly claimed almost. Like, oh man, see, I like when they do stuff like this, getting the ball rolling a little bit, especially if like, okay, it's like a weird rocky road, especially when it comes to sequel trilogies or sequel series, is that how do you introduce things to people that both already know the material, but also to people that don't know the material at the same time?
Right. It's a difficult balance. I'd say that this, from what I've read so far of these two chapters, you could probably go into this completely without knowing any of the backstory, and you'd get it, sort of. But it also is really nice as someone who has read Percy Jackson and the Olympians, because of like the throwbacks to the other characters and like connecting it to the larger world we already understand. So it's so far doing a pretty good balance of those things. Like I said, I'm really kind of like looking forward to finding out more about these new characters, and again, for them to like break out of like the very like loose sketch of an idea of what they are. Right now we have these characters that, again, like, we're associating them with characters we've met before. Oh, this character is sort of like Grover. This character is sort of like Percy. This is sort of like Annabeth. But they're obviously so much more complicated and nuanced than that. They're their own people, and I'm looking forward to finding out what that means.
I'm interested because I think I said this before, but I have not really read Heroes of Olympus all that much. Like, it came out when I was in high school and didn't get finished until I was in college. So for me, it's my least read out of all of them. I actually haven't read Trials of Apollo. I did read Magnus Chase because I love Norse mythology, so that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating from your perspective, because normally you're like really well versed in what happens, because you'd read Percy Jackson at least more than once. Yeah, so like you
17,000 times
the general sketch of what was going to happen, even if you didn't remember details or whatever. So it's going to be slightly different. I'm not going to be the only one who doesn't know what's going to happen, I guess.
No, and this is going to be interesting. I'm excited. So B, do you want to read some listener emails? Because we have a lot, because we went on vacation.
Sure do. This is so weird that we can't guess what's going to happen next, to some extent, because there's no like chapter title for me to read and then guess. So I guess the next episode you're going to come up with a chapter title name, and I'm going to do the synopsis. So that's what you guys have to look forward to. In some ways I wish there were chapter titles because I'm so used to that format of guessing, but I guess we're going in completely new here.
See, that's why I miss that so much. Like, I love chapter titles because they're so funny and ridiculous. Though
it's fun, and it kind of gives you a little bit of a hint of what's going to happen. Not always, but sometimes.
Yeah, and I think it also adds like expectations, as if Rick Riordan wrote it for perfect use for a podcast, and now like, what do we do? But the next Viewpoint chapter is going to be all about Piper. So this is going to be interesting. What do you think is going to happen with Piper? Because they're obviously going back to camp now.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know, really. Because we didn't mention that the frickin' coach was yeeted into the sky by the vent. So he's also missing, and I guess he had some sort of information to give Annabeth also, which she's kind of angry about, and she assumed her quote-unquote answer would be there, and he's missing, and Jason is there, and supposedly he's the answer then, because he's missing a shoe. So there's a lot to parse here. I don't really know much about Piper or Leo yet. Like I said, even I feel like Piper especially is kind of a mystery. We've been hinted at as to, her dad is powerful. She's never met her mom, so I guess her mom would be her godly parent because she's powerful in a more mysterious, unknown way.
Who knows? Who knows? I'm interested to go back to camp and see our old friends again. So, B, are you ready to read some listener emails? We got quite a few because we were on vacation for 2 weeks. So we're going to read as many as we can for right now. If you don't hear them, there'll probably be a next week's episode.
We got an email from Misty who says, just to say how much I like you, kindest regards. Dear Zach and B, by the way, if I'm misspelling your name, I'm sorry. It's just B like the letter. It's pretty. It's just my first initial.
No, I'm sure it's like BEE, like Murder Hornets.
Yeah, like the Murder Hornets. The prophecy was foretold.
Yeah.
Just want to say, I love your podcast. I give it 5 stars, or 3 tridents up. 3 is the best. I listen to a few other PJO podcasts, and yours is by far the best. My favorite character is Talia. B, I can't wait for your thoughts on Jason, Piper, and Leo. My favorite series is Heroes of Olympus. Right now I'm reading The Blood of Olympus. I'm Rachel Elizabeth Dare, and you're watching Disney Channel. Next episode, Eye on the Prize. Or next up, Eye on the Prize. Sincerely, Rachel Elizabeth Dare. Wow.
B, have you ever seen the videos of someone's actually taken like a
Yes!
program that traces where they go
Yes!
and like how awful they are?
That's the best. You guys, if you have not seen this, maybe they still do this, right? Where like
they still do that.
A Disney Channel star takes this weird, I don't know, it looks like a glow stick, I guess. It's a wand, and they're like they're making the Mickey Mouse ears, but someone went in and like traced what they actually look like, and it's not like Mickey Mouse, and it's very funny.
I love it. It's so great because you realize very quickly how much editing's one heck of a program.
Right, exactly. They just like put it up there, like there it is, but it doesn't look like that. It's really good. Thank you so much for your email.
Thank
That's
you.
really nice. Like I said, yeah, we're looking forward to finding out about these characters as much as you are. 3 tridents up, huh? Thank you.
That is a lot of tridents. That's like 369. That's like 9 pointy bits.
Yeah, that's more tridents than I have, which are none.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. We really appreciate all of our wonderful emails. So I have an email, B. You ready for this one? So we have an email from Jameson that says, Hi, Zach and B. Been listening for a few months, really enjoyed the podcast. There are 2 aspects of the format that work really, really well. The one person knowing and the one person not knowing.
I don't know
which
anything.
I've seen in various other pop culture as well as the West Wing Weekly. Potterless creates a great dynamic and the conversation aspect to it. Nearly every podcast I've tried where it's one person talking bores me. You have inspired me to try my own version of it as soon as I finish my master's. I'm not going to say the property, so none of you listeners do it before I can, smiley face. I've been looking forward to you to be reading Heroes of Olympus. I think the change in format will suit the story and make things feel less tedious for you to go a little faster while still allowing for your trademark close reading. It's also when Rick Riordan really starts trying to diversify his cast, which is great and even better in Magnus Chase. Magnus Chase is my favorite of the 4 series. I didn't particularly care for the Kane one, so I hope that in 20 years' time, when you finish Heroes of Olympus, you move on to Magnus Chase before Kane. Side note, I have 2 jobs with offices in or near major locations of Magnus Chase. My grad school is about 20 feet from a 3rd location, which makes it more fun. One last thing, my only criticism, Zach, you have a bad habit of interrupting and talking over B. As a listener, I find this irritating, and I hope that's something you can work on as the podcast moves forward. Have a good break and keep staying mortal inside.
Inside.
What I'll say about the interrupting thing, this is going to sound really weird, but what you're listening to is a very edited version of our conversations, and you'd be surprised due to internet and lag that it's not that we're interrupting each other, but because there's latency.
There's like an overlap of us talking, but we're not actually, yeah, like you said, I wouldn't say that you interrupt me any more than I interrupt you, but like also like the flow of the conversation. Like right now, I'm kind of talking over you, but it's because it's like
No,
there's
you're fine.
like no way for us to figure out, I guess, through cues who wants to talk.
We also don't record this over video chat just for like our internet doesn't die yet, so like we're doing this totally blind. Like I get where you're coming from with like the interrupt us stuff because we're gonna call it interrupt us, but most of it has to do with like latency and lag. It's not like I just like talking over B because my thing is
My opinions are good. Yeah. Also, it's like what you hear on the show is actually not everything we say. A lot of things are like edited to be close together to like flow better. So a lot of times what Zach is saying, he wasn't saying right on top of me, but it's just like the way that it's edited might sound that way.
Yeah, and so my golden rule as well is when it comes to like if I'm interrupting, like saying talking over B, normally it's because I keep that in there is when they actually react to me. So when B, like I say something and B's like, oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Like it would sound more awkward not to have it in there. And also, even when it comes to like natural conversations, like I've taken a lot of classes on public speaking. It's actually very natural for people to actually kind of talk over people in some sense. Like I've heard podcasts,
right, like overlap.
Yeah, overlap. And I've heard plenty of podcasts where everyone just talks over each other and it's a hot mess. I'd consider our show to be a little better.
No, like I would agree with that.
And I understand where your concern's coming from because it can get annoying. I mean, I can work better on certain aspects.
Yeah, we only have the audio that we have, so to some extent, it's like if you want to include what you said and what I said, sometimes it ends up sounding like we're talking over each other. It's like podcasting is weird though, because it's like if you were watching a video of us, it wouldn't necessarily seem as much like we were talking over each other, and more just like that's the flow of the conversation. So I really appreciate your concern, but I definitely don't feel like Zach talks over me. So I think we're good.
Yeah, no, you'd be surprised. Like we do talk over each other, or sometimes we want to interject. So I cut those parts out. Like if I showed you what the timeline looks like, you'd be actually kind of shocked. Like I've shown B how many edits I do for our podcast, and it's ungodly.
Yeah, well, because we blab also.
Oh, we blab. Did I have to talk about the 2-hour sandwich conversation?
That was the one I had to edit, which I tried my best.
I can't remember what episode
I give up on this.
I can't remember. Oh, man. So, B, do we get any other emails? But thank you so much, Jameson. I really appreciate it.
We sure did. Yeah, thank you for your feedback.
We love criticism, and that's one that we'll take to heart. So thank you so much. And you know what? Kick butt in grad school.
Yeah, wow. If I was in grad school, I can't imagine.
I also think Magnus Chase, if I remember correctly, takes place in Boston. So maybe have fun and get some falafels.
So we got an email from Robert, who you may know as Robert Meme Gamer, runner of the wonderful Percy Jackson meme page on Twitter. And he said, "Hey Zach and B, hope you're doing well during these trying times. Congratulations on finishing the Percy Jackson Olympian series. I look forward to your next project, The Heroes of Olympus. More importantly, I look forward to you two watching the bigger train wreck of a movie, The Sea of Monsters, and reacting to that. It's been a blast from the past 2 years, and I mean, wow, 2 whole years, it's wild. Here's to another 12 years of PJO Media. I do have a bit of a request. If my calculations are correct, they probably aren't. You would be reading this for the episode, which goes up on April 27th, which is my birthday. We took some time off, so not quite. So a little birthday shout out would mean a lot, especially since mine and everyone's April and May birthday is gonna suck because of COVID-19. I'm glad you two did this, and I look forward to hearing what else you got cooking. Thanks for everything you two do. Bye." Sorry, Robert, we missed your birthday, but happy birthday. Happy belated birthday.
So all I'm going to say about this, B, is that because we can legally say this because it's in the public domain, happy birthday to you.
I don't know if I could sing.
Oh, you can't sing? Come on.
Come on, I have weird testosterone voice. Don't make me do this.
You gotta do it for Robert. Come on.
Do it for... Okay.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear. Insert
dear
Robert's
Robert.
name here. Happy birthday to you. And many more on Channel 4.
Well, I like how we both did that. You know you're a pain in the butt if you're the type of person who says, "and many more." I have this Uncle Terry who has he can do a very deep sort of vibrato weird voice, and every birthday it was really great because none of us would feel insecure about saying happy birthday because he would just be like, "Happy birthday," really deep, and it would freaking crack me up every time, and it kind of let us all sing happy birthday without any insecurities about how we sounded. because he had it overwhelmed everyone else.
Oh, okay. B, did you do many more on Channel 4? Did you do Happy Birthday Cha Cha Cha?
I said sometimes not anymore, or sometimes I don't think we ever did the cha cha cha. Sometimes we did Are You One, Are You Two, and like that was always a joke, especially if it was like, you know, my grandma and she was like 75 or something. Now she's like in her 80s, or is she 90 already? Oh geez, I've lost count.
Oh. But thank you so much, Robert. Robert is an amazing friend of the show, and we really appreciate all the effort that he's done for our show. We just want to say happy birthday, man. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're kicking butt. And I think he's also doing his own podcast called Consult the Oracle.
He is.
That's a lot of fun.
So yeah, now, and he's also posting some memes about other Percy Jackson podcasts, which is really cool. So we're all part of like a little Percy Jackson podcast family. So what other emails did we get?
So we got one from Ton, and it's actually a little bit of fan art. It's Interruptus. This is what I thought he looked like, and I really like your podcast. It's Interruptus, and we're going to have it on Twitter. It's adorable.
I guess like a dude in a toga, sort of, with like really bad teeth and purple hair.
Going yak, yak, yak.
Yeah. Now that's what I'm going to imagine.
Hopefully we don't get as much Interruptus. Like, Interruptus took a backseat in the first 2 chapters, and I love it. Well, no, he didn't.
He showed up at the end when they say Percy Jackson, you mean?
No, when they took Coach Hedge.
Oh, I get he. It was Interruptus who yeeted him into the sky.
Yeah, exactly. Well, oh no, a cohesive plot. Better take him away.
Bye-bye. Thank you for that fan art. I love when we get fan art of our dumb jokes.
Oh no, Team Exposition blasting off again.
Oh my god.
Blink.
Hello, my name is Sophia, and I'm from New Jersey. Can I just say, being able to listen to your podcast makes studying for AP exams so much more bearable. Winky face. Thank you for creating such an interesting read-along podcast. I love the way you connect the things you read about to personal experiences and other works and forms of entertainment. I'm dying to hear the next episode that will start your reading of The Lost Hero, and I was wondering when it'll be out. Once again, thank you. Also, Zach, how are you so good at not spoiling things for B? Just as a listener, I have a strong urge to yell spoilers. Winky face. So yeah, here we are. This is when we're recording it. I don't know when this is coming out. I guess Monday. So that'll be.
This is dropping Monday.
Yeah. So it's already we're flying through May
there
already, which is super bizarre because I feel like May just started and it's already the 9th when we're recording this, but it'll be up soon. And then we're gonna have our weekly schedule for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, we'll be back to normal. We wanted to take like a 2-week vacation because I think we earned it.
Yeah, just a little break, but we're gonna be back on, you know, a weekly schedule of discussing, I guess, like we said, not individual chapters, but by whatever character is discussed in whatever, like 1 or 2 or I guess sometimes 3 chapters, and we'll do that format for now.
And we'll post it in the show notes, and I'll also possibly post like later on, like, hey guys, we're gonna be reading these chapters because some people have the digital book, some have the actual physical book. The next chapters we're going to be covering is Piper 3 and 4.
Yeah, so it's 2 more, but with a new character. Not a new character, you know what I mean.
Well, she is a new character.
Yes, well, she's new in the sense that we're not that familiar with her. So I'm interested to see how much more we learn about her.
Yes, I'm interested to see who she is, how she acts, and also, you know, it's interesting because Rick Riordan has an interesting aspect when it comes to female characters. So this is going to be interesting to get into actually our first time getting a female viewpoint character.
That's true. That's interesting. I'm gonna. I don't know. I wonder if that's gonna be any different reading. How Rick Riordan writes
internal female dialogue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's kind of fascinating.
So we'll be getting there actually next week. So to answer the question why I'm so good at not spoiling B, there's this thing I usually have to sign when I'm doing projects called NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. And pretty much they are, if I spilled the beans on anything, I get fined or I can go to jail. So don't like doing that.
You're pretty good at that, right? I mean, like, literally you man our email just because of that. Like, you don't want me to get spoiled. We've, like, turned down opportunities to, like, have different, like, guests on or go on other shows because of the very strict rule that I cannot get spoiled because so much of our premise has to do with me not knowing what's happening. Sure, sometimes I occasionally get sort of spoiled because I follow some Percy Jackson adjacent stuff on social media, but I really try to stay away from it. And in general, it's like I'm not really that motivated to get spoiled. I like a surprise. I like guessing every week what's going to happen. So I guess we on both ends we're very motivated to like not kind of like spoil it and
Yeah, and it kind of
make
takes
it
the fun out
yeah
of
take the fun out of it. Exactly. It's just like it wouldn't be the same if I like knew the synopsis of what happened.
My philosophy for this is that I've gone to Disneyland 1,000 times. I like when I used to work at Disneyland, I would take people that have never gone before and just look at the genuine reaction to going there for the first time. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. So I'll just leave it at that. So we did get one more email, and this one is from Amy. It says, "Hi, I just want to tell you guys how much I love your podcast. Rick Riordan has been my favorite author for a while, so I was really happy when I found this podcast. I love the friendly banter between the two of you, as well as the interesting analysis of the books. Right now I'm on episode 40, so I still have a long ways to get caught up, but I'm trying to binge listen so I can catch up in time for the next series. Thank you so much for your dedication to the podcast because it can really be disappointing when you get hooked on something, but it gets forgotten. Love you from Central London, Amy." Yeah, there's a lot of podcasts that kind of have like the stop and go mentality where kind of like you get really invested in and then they stop making episodes and you're just like, oh, I like that show. That was fun. What happened to it?
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys listening. I'm glad you enjoy our weird little show. I hope that you enjoy the new format and that, you know, you adjust to it as we do. It's gonna be mostly the same, or like I don't know what Zach is gonna keep in or not, but like even like us being like, "Good morning, campers. Welcome to Radio Camp Half Blood, a Percy Jackson read along podcast." We're like, is it a Percy Jackson? Should it be Rick Riordan read along podcast? Should it be Heroes of Olympus?
Nah, it's
like
Percy Jackson.
we're just gonna keep Percy Jackson, but you know we're just adjusting and figuring out how the show will stay the same and also change slightly.
So there's going to be a little bit of growing pains. We're going to try to keep to the format. We might adjust some things. We might take some things out. So just be cautious. Like some things we might be changing up a little bit. One thing that we're kind of changing up is we're probably going to be making like an FAQ for certain, frequently asked questions so we don't have to keep reading them on air. Not to say that we don't like reading them, but it's easier just to help streamline the email process for like, what's your favorite character? What's your favorite chapter? What's your favorite book? Obviously, we're going to get those questions and we really appreciate those questions, but we're going to try to redirect them to a special episode we're going to be making. As well as when it comes to like Percy Jackson questions, we're totally going to answer them to the best of our ability. So you can give us Heroes of Olympus questions. You can give us Percy Jackson questions. Because, we're not dum-dums like, oh man, we've done 100 episodes of Percy Jackson. Now we're going to Heroes of Olympus. What are we going to do next? We're going to keep everything pretty much the exact same. So I hope you guys enjoy the new show, enjoy the new format. So B, did we get any iTunes reviews?
So yeah, we got 2 new iTunes reviews. Do you want to read the first one?
Yes. So the first one's from Ava Noel, and it says, "I love the podcast. You have to read the rest of the books, Heroes of Olympus, Trials of Apollo, and Magnus Chase. But what about the Kane Chronicles? No love for the Kane Chronicles?"
Yeah, it seems like people don't like that one for whatever reason. And we got another 5-star review from, what is this? CHLLM.
It kind of looks like Chud, but that's wrong because Chud's...
I'm like Chillum, I don't know. Who says, "You guys are amazing and stay that way." Winky face. P.S. The Trials of Apollo explains so much.
I'm sure it does.
Now everyone's going to be Trials of Apollo is going to be the new Heroes of Olympus, where now that we're reading Heroes of Olympus, everyone's going to be like, Trials of Apollo.
Yeah, we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do next because I want to read King Chronicles or Magnus Chase first. Gotta give a little break to the Greek mythology and go to other things, though.
Right, that's true.
B, you know what the next series apparently Rick Riordan's going to be writing is, mythology-wise?
I'm not sure, actually.
Irish mythology.
Oh, right. Wait, I vaguely heard about this. That's very interesting. 'Cause it's going to be like the Fae or something spooky like that. Leprechauns.
It's going to be about the Fae. I mean, you're going to have a cameo in it. Hello, I'm B.
That's exactly how I said it.
Would you like a potato? Oh no, B! Oh my god, main character of that series is gonna have a potato sword. Calling it right now.
Yes, of course. Not a shillelagh sword? Like, that's obviously a shillelagh would be The obvious.
Okay, what would you like, B? Because obviously you've watched The Luck of the Irish like 1,000 times.
I really haven't. My dad actually really hated that movie. He was like, I don't understand why this has anything to do with Irish people. Do you know what a shillelagh is, by the way? I'm trying to find out how common it is for people to know what that is.
Yes, I know what a shillelagh is. Isn't it like a cudgel?
Basically, yeah. One time I mentioned it to Sarah, and she was like, I'm not a weird Irish person like you. I don't know what a shillelagh is. And it's like, okay, listen, a lot of people know what it is, not just weird Irish people, but it is what it is. She has said that the commonality between me being of Irish descent and her being of Ashkenazi Jewish descent is that our ancestors played the fiddle and pulled potatoes out of the frozen earth.
And danced on roofs. I know. I've seen Fiddler on the
True.
roof.
Yeah.
Here, I want like a Rick Riordan to write like a Jewish mythology one where we have like someone main weapon is throwing bottles of gefilte fish at enemies.
Oh, well, that would make me run for the hills. But I thought you were going to say, like, with golems and stuff, because that'd be pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, heck yeah, I'd love golems.
I can't really think of any other Jewish mythology other than golems, but, be cool to find out.
Divot boxes, because there are such things as Jewish demons that you hide in divot boxes.
Oh, right, yeah. So there's some stuff there. Listen, there's a lot of material for mythology. Let's say that every culture has a mythology.
Someone has a shield made out of Seinfeld DVDs.
I mean, I guess to some extent you could say like most of a modern superhero canon is Jewish mythology because so many of like early comic books were written by Jewish people.
Superman.
Yeah.
Spider-Man. Well, guys, this is my little lesson on awesome things about being Jewish. So, B, where can they find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at bkellygorman, and you can find me on Tumblr at twinpoetry.tumblr.com.
And if you want to find me on Twitter, you can find me at Suda41. That's SUDA41. If you want to follow our show on Twitter, that's at halfblood_radio. If you want to email the show, you can email us at radiocamphalfblood@gmail.com. We will read your emails on air. And we also have a Patreon/RadioCampHalfBlood. We have t-shirts available at TeePublic. We're probably going to try to update those very soon and actually make t-shirts for people. I feel like that's going to be something that we should try to fix that a little bit. Now that we're on a new series, we need a Keep Staying Mortal shirt, a Horsing Around shirt. Like we gotta get on that.
We gotta get on the merch train. Listen, I would love to wear more of our merch for sure. I haven't even like bought a Radio Camp Half-Blood shirt myself. I steal my mom's.
So if anyone wants to like possibly send in some submissions, would totally see what we can do
like
about
art
that.
ideas. Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Art ideas. That'd be fun. I would love to have like a Keep Staying Mortal shirt and also a Horsing Around shirt.
Oh man, a Horsing Around shirt is a long time coming. I would love that because trying to explain that to people would just be so difficult. It would already be difficult to honestly describe what Percy Jackson is, what Radio Camp Half-Blood is to people who don't know. Then again, I haven't gone out in public in a while because of, the pandemic, so it's like maybe I'll just wear it in the comfort of my own home as pajamas.
That awkward moment when someone goes to a signing of Rick Riordan's book and they're wearing a Horsing Around t-shirt and they have to explain what it is.
Yeah, there's just so many layers. There's too many layers.
Oh man, it's hot. Take off those layers, B. Oh god, I'm sweating.
It's not hot here. It snowed here today.
Well, we're in the middle of a heat wave right now.
It's May and it snowed.
Happy May Day, everybody. Let's all gather our hands as we burn a wicker man. Well, guys, I'm Zach.
I'm B.
And let's keep staying mortal. See ya.
Bye, guys.